I propose that there are two types of etymology. There's cultural etymology and poetic etymology. There's the origins of the word, the cultural origins like Latin, Greek, French. Where did the word come from? What other languages? Antecedent forms, and what did they mean? And then there's the iconic origins. If you look at a word, there's usually poetic signaling in the word. The words have apparently evolved to imitate and indicate their meaning somehow. For example, take the word echo. If you look at the etymology of the word echo is echo is the name of a figure out of Greek mythology, a woman who was repeating everything someone said. She would just repeat it back to them, echo it. And so it comes from it's a Greek name. That's the etymology. And that's interesting, and you can leave it at that. But the word itself also has an iconic quality to it, an imitative quality. The word echo, echo. It's a sound that seems to imitate an echo, echo, echo. An onomatopoeia, imitative sound, however you want to describe it. I call that the iconic origin. Onomatopoeias are this way, like the word crow, crow. You might look that up and it's probably Old English for the bird crow. And it might also say imitative. That's the poetymology. The fact that craw, craw, the word crow, whatever its cultural origins, also, not coincidentally, sounds like the bird that the name represents. Cricket, cricket. All these are onomatopoeia. Words like whistle, whistle, murmur, murmur, lisp, stutter. These are imitative words. There's other classes of words, verbal gestures. When I say tooth, my tongue tip ends up on the front teeth, like it's pointing them out. Tooth. Lip does the same thing. These words imitate or indicate their meaning. They point their meaning out as you're speaking them. Visemes is another type of poetymology, poetic signaling, iconic signaling. For example, viseme is when you use the expression on your face to, when the word mimics its meaning by showing the expression on your face. For example, wince, ouch. These words lend themselves to kind of a hurt look, wince. I think the poetymology, the iconic origin of the word has been greatly overlooked, partly because it's poetry. It's subjective. It's harder to be objective. It's hard to be sure that an onomatopoeia, it's a subtle thing. So we tend to focus on the cultural origins comparing to other words. But close inspection, you really explicate each little word as though it was a poem. Basically, look for any poetic signaling in it. Our language is rich with this fossil poetry. The words are made up of verbal gestures, onomatopoeia, visemes, all kinds of little tricks, word, games to indicate their meaning. It's very valuable when you're learning the language to realize this, that words evolved out of the performance of speech. It's theater, storytelling. We gesture. Not there are many anthropologists. There are anthropologists who think that language may have started with hand gestures. That we learned how to point and to communicate with our fellows with our hands, but we gradually evolved the ability to take the same programming, like over there, here, basically it was similar complicated programs with our hands. We learned how to also do it with our mouth, and then to throw the voice as well in combination with the movements and the gestures made in our mouth. You can kind of see this, like words like grab, clamp, grasp, the back of the mouth, grasp. Or say the word press, press, press. Look at your lips when you say press. You're pressing the lips together. You can kind of do that with your hand. And, we know that languages for deaf people are remarkable in what they can do with their hands to basically articulate meaning in a very similar way. Well, it's the motor neuron programs are transferable to some degree from hand gesture to spoken gesture. And it's one reason probably why we make so much hand gestures as we're speaking. It's because they co-evolved somewhat. Unconsciously, we can kind of read the hands as we go along as well, so it aids in communication. Now, words, it's the iconism that I'm talking about in poetymology, the iconic signaling. I think it's part of the origin of the word because it makes the word more memorable. And that helps the word last in our language, basically. If a word feels more apt, more appropriate to the meaning that we're trying to convey, it's easier to remember. And each time we say it the neural structures, the motor neuron program is strengthened in our brain. Neurons get stronger. The longer we go without using a word, the weaker it gets. Entropy, it dissipates. And so the words that are more memorable, more apt to a particular situation, get used more often. And that's the evolutionary process. It's words evolve to appeal to our memories, our psyches, basically. But memory is sort of the selective force that chooses words that the next generation can't recognize, can't remember, it, they don't use it. It doesn't get used, and so it dissipates and it's not part of our language. So that's the natural selection process for our words. And I believe that poetymology, the iconism, is a major driver in word evolution. So when we study etymology, it's valuable to find the cultural history, where the word came from. But it's equally valuable to study the poetic history, to explicate the poetry in each word, the poetic device, the poetic signaling in each word, in order to understand how it fits into our psyche and why our psyche chooses this word, why the word works better. What about it? Like fork and spoon. These basic words, spoon, smooth, that smooth, rounded sound. There's a certain kinesthesia, the way speaking a sound can feel or sound smoother than another. But that synesthesia or kinesthesia, the movement of it, the sound of it, helps convey a meaning that children can recognize. Smoothness of spoon helps a child recognize that this rounded utensil is spoon, and fork, where the K sticks in the back, fork, is more likely to be this pointy utensil. And then even more subtly, knife, the way the teeth press into the flesh of the lips, same as in flesh, the fleshy part of the lower lip, flesh, verbal gesturing. These clues to a child entering into a language, learning language from other people's faces and from the feeling of speech in their own. These cues add up to an intuitive logic, sort of the logic of the language. And every language, in order to last and to be passed on to the next generation, has to have its internal logic. The words have to make sense and be memorable to the next generation. And this is how iconism evolves in our words. Poetymology, an important part of etymology. The iconic signaling of words.